What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new Johnny Depp film, Black Mass. Black Mass is the story of notorious Boston mobster Whitey Bulger and his rise to becoming the greatest crime boss Boston has ever seen and being an FBI informant. Now, going into Black Mass, most people were talking about how great Johnny Depp's performance was, and also how the movie was really good. Now, the movie was getting a lot less spotlight than Johnny Depp's performance was in terms of the press the movie was getting, because most people were saying he's a contender for, like, Best Actor Oscar this year. And in this movie, he gave possibly the best performance of his career. He is amazing in this film. He is extremely scary, he's extremely intimidating, and even though he has like makeup and like contacts in that kind of add to it, it wasn't like Steve Carell's performance in Foxcatcher last year, which I think is a good comparison here, because they both played kind of creepy, psychotic characters. But in this case, Depp's performance came through, where with Carell, don't get me wrong, his performance was phenomenal in Foxcatcher, but the makeup really pushed his performance to another level, where with this, Depp's performance is what's carrying it, where the makeup does help in certain situations, mostly the contacts, but his performance is the thing that really carries this film. Now, the other performances in this movie were honestly really good. Joel Edgerton played an FBI agent whose job was to kind of hunt down Whitey Bulger, but he was friends with him from when they were kids. And then Benedict Cumberbatch was great in the movie, playing Whitey Bulger's brother. Honestly, every performance in this movie, with the exception of some smaller side characters, was really good. Most of the main performances in this movie actually impressed me. I thought Joel Edgerton was very good. He has never really impressed me in a movie. He's been good in some movies like Gatsby or Warrior, but this movie he actually impressed me with his acting ability and the range he could cover. This story was also very interesting. I knew a little bit about Whitey Bulger. I had heard his name before. I knew he was a crime boss from Boston. That's all I knew though, and going into this movie, obviously there was more things that I heard about what he had done and like how bad of a person he was kind of, but going into the movie I didn't know how they would portray it, and honestly it was kind of disappointing. The story was still interesting, but they focused way more on the exposition and way less on what he actually did. Now this is kind of the middle ground where I don't know whether it's a pro or a con in this situation. The script for this movie, there are aspects of this script, mainly the dialogue, that I felt was actually very good. Some of the sequences with dialogue were extremely intimidating and scary because you didn't know what Bulger was going to do, but in other sequences it just felt like there was way too much exposition in this movie. It was very boring, to say the least. I don't want to describe the movie as a boring film, because it was interesting, but in terms of the way it was written, there were sequences where you were like, wow, that was a really good sequence. Like, the dialogue was great, the actors' chemistry in that scene was really good, but then you get another scene where it's literally just two guys standing there talking about something, and it does pertain to the story, but it doesn't pertain to the story enough to where it's like, wow, this scene was necessary, rather than me seeing more of Bulger being this horrendous crime boss that this whole movie is basically claiming that he is. The other thing with the script is I feel like it never picked up. The story starts, and the movie started a little slow when I was sitting there watching, and I was like, alright, you know, we've had a couple little sequences that were cool, but for the most part, this movie's been fairly boring for the beginning part, and I was like, you know, it's a biopic, you kind of gotta cut it a break, let it start a little slow, and then it'll get interesting. But the thing is there's this big, extremely huge moment in Bulger's life that happens, and then they kind of mark that in the film as almost this part where he kind of goes more crazy than he already was, but then the movie doesn't pick up, the script doesn't get more interesting, there's not more meat on the bone of it, it just kind of stays with the same way that it was moving in the beginning, and it never feels like it gets super interesting. Now, the last thing about this movie that I will say is just bad, is there are some actors in this film that they hired that were supposed to have a Boston accent. Now, Boston is not an easy accent to do. You gotta do a lot of practice to get a Boston accent down, and once you have it down, it can sound extremely realistic and very good. But there are some actors in this movie whose Boston accents were so terrible that it just took you out of the scene. There's one sequence, and I'm looking at you, Corey Stoll, because your accent in this movie is basically non-existent except for when you say any word that ends in like, ooh, and then you kind of throw a little Boston in there, and then the rest of your words are just normal, and that doesn't work. That's not how an accent works. It has to be everything you say, and he ruined multiple sequences in this movie with the fact that his Boston accent was kind of like not there, but then randomly would show up in a word. Overall, Black Mass was okay. It wasn't great and it wasn't bad. It was kind of disappointing because it had this opportunity to make a great movie, and it took from other mob movies which you would think would be good, but instead of kind of analyzing and then revamping what those previous mob movies did, it kind of just took the idea and just redid it in a different scene with different dialogue. So that was kind of disappointing about the film. Depp's performance is amazing, and this movie did exactly what I wanted it to do in that aspect. It made me believe that Johnny Depp can still act, because his track record has gone down the drain recently, and I'm very happy to see a movie that showcases how great of an actor this guy really is. I'm gonna give Black Mass a B. This wasn't the worst film ever, it's not even the worst mob film ever, but it just didn't have that meat on its bones of what you want from a mob film. You know, that visceral violence, that want to hate these guys even though they're so cool. This movie didn't do that. It made it so you were scared of Bulger, which is good, but it never made you kind of feel for him as a human. It humanized him in certain sequences, but then even in the sequences that were supposed to humanize him, he didn't feel humanized. The script didn't give him that chance for us to actually feel for him. And it's just disappointing because this movie could have been so much better. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Black Mass, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and I hope to see you guys later.